Everyone assumes that Marx was like everyone gets the same amount of money regardless guy, and absolutely
It's
not.
rather just the full value of the labor that they put into a thing. So, in other
Yep.
words, I'm sitting there on the line making a car. There's no way what the CEO is doing is worth 5,000 times more than what I'm doing.
Most of you probably know who Nina Turner is. But just in case you don't, she is a twice failed congressional candidate, progressive activist, and political commentator. She currently hosts the show Unbossed on the TYT network and has a pretty active Twitter account. Back in January, she tweeted out, "Remember, line cooks at McDonald's do more to generate profits than the CEO." I quote tweeted this saying, "This isn't true," which it isn't. That simple tweet got a surprising amount of traction as the Amazing Atheist responded to me saying it is. Also, a leftist Twitch streamer called Gremlo screenshotted it with the caption, "I've never seen a CEO make a burger," and followed it with a thread of Marxist gobbledygook, including one tweet which read, "The question of do CEOs create value is no. The capital that facilitates the exchange of value was gained by and large by taking the value generated through labor and calling it profit. They deserve it for some reason, and we don't ask where they got it most of the time." Now, I have some good news for Mr. Gremlo and anyone else who subscribes to similar theories of economics. Most restaurants, and most businesses that open, period, don't exploit their workers by profiting off their labor. Why do I say that? Because most businesses that are started never turn a profit in the first place. The vast majority of businesses close within their first few years of opening their doors. Estimates on how many businesses never turn a profit vary, but according to the Small Business Administration, a full 50% of small businesses fail within the first 5 years of operation. By year 10, this number skyrockets to a full 70%. Restaurants are a notorious example of businesses that typically don't last that long. Pretty much everyone can think of something local that was never really able to establish a footing. If the workers are the ones responsible for the profits, what's the difference between these places and McDonald's? Did the workers at the joint that closed after 6 months just not work as hard as the McDonald's staff? It's kind of weird when you think about it. Mom and pop restaurants usually don't have CEOs, but McDonald's does. Why is it that McDonald's is so much more successful even though they're dragging around this completely useless employee? A better question, though, is why is it that McDonald's, with its profits of $13.2 billion in 2022, more successful than even its other giant fast food competitors? Is McDonald's just that much better at exploiting its workers? I'm sure some people would say yes, but I would argue that McDonald's is the biggest restaurant chain in the world because they're better at doing lots of things. Going back to Gremlo's original tweet, "I've never seen a CEO make a burger," does he honestly think that all there is to McDonald's is making food? I can't imagine he's that stupid, but I do think that people tend to underestimate how much there is to a given business. Most of us only see the public-facing side of a company, the part where the good or service is delivered. We usually don't see the process that leads up to that exchange, and we certainly don't think about it. That's kind of the point of a business. They sweat the details of delivering a product or service so you don't have to. You just pay them money and they do the rest. In the case of McDonald's, the food you order is the capstone of a long and complex process. A process that the customer rarely sees outside of perhaps a McDonald's semi-trailer on the road, that nonetheless makes the restaurant's ability to serve food possible. Managing this side of the business is far more in the purview of the CEO than are the actual restaurants, most of which are franchises that are locally controlled and operated. But there are lots of wage laborers behind the scenes too. Isn't McDonald's just profiting off of their labor as well? Sure, and McDonald's isn't going to hire someone unless they believe they're going to make money off their labor. And that's not a problem. The worker values the money they get more than the time they give up for it, and the company values their labor more than they do the money, at least in theory. Having spent much of my professional life in management, I can tell you firsthand that you want good, reliable people. But you're in no way guaranteed to get this when you bring someone on board. The Amazing Atheist, unlike me, has actually worked in the food service industry. He got hired at IHOP to be a line cook, but they brought him out to wait tables because they were short-staffed. This was either his first day or one of his first days, I can't remember. When waiting the table of a rude customer, the dude pissed him off so much that TJ brought out his pancakes and threw them on the customer's lap. TJ proceeded to walk off the job. I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess that IHOP didn't profit off of TJ's labor. You see, people are not these interchangeable labor-producing units. Even for entry-level jobs, you need to find the right person. And even a good worker at an entry-level position needs to be trained in before they start making the company money. I used to work at UPS, and we didn't start making money off our package handlers unless they loaded 300 packages per hour. In the best of cases, it usually took the person about a month to get to that point. And a lot of people didn't make it that long and quit within their first few weeks. The thing is, they all got paid from their first minute on the clock, irrespective of whether they were producing anything of value for the company. I've told this story before, but it's worth going over again. One day, at my current job, I made a mistake that cost my employer at least $18,000. I still got paid at the end of the week. Now, I've been with my current employer for a long time, and have made the company plenty of money over the years. Except that wasn't true at the time. I was still relatively new when this happened. They didn't know if this was going to be a habitual thing with me, so they were taking a pretty big risk by keeping me on. Profits from labor are not guaranteed. The wage laborer is simply not taking the same sort of risk that the company that hires him is. This is why capital is so important. In the cases where the company is not paying the worker according to agreed upon terms, which unfortunately does happen, the workers are well within their rights to sue for breach of contract, as they should and as people do. And those responsible within the company should be criminally prosecuted. Fortunately, wage theft does not happen at most jobs. Most mainstream economists usually divide things up into 4 factors of production: land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. To quote Investopedia, in economics, capital typically refers to money. However, money is not a factor of production because it is not directly involved in producing a good or service. Instead, it facilitates the processes used in production by enabling entrepreneurs and company owners to purchase capital goods. In the case of McDonald's, an example of a capital good would be a deep fryer, or land, or to pay wages. In the case of McDonald's, land could literally be the real estate it's on, but it also includes the raw materials like potatoes and beef. For modern mainstream neoclassical economists, capital is the primary driver of value. Conventional wisdom isn't always correct, but in this case it absolutely is. This is why the 4 factors of production is literally day 1 introductory economic stuff, and why Marxists, with their disdain for capital, constantly have to explain why the 20th century doesn't count. Going back to the supposedly irrelevant CEO, the CEO is the man or woman at the top of the corporate structure that is usually in charge of the largest capital decisions a company makes. These decisions have consequences for the health of the company that reverberate throughout, all the way down to the entry-level workers. If you don't believe that CEOs matter or that they don't make consequential decisions, just look at examples of CEOs making terrible choices that doomed their companies. I've documented a number of them in videos before, so I'll just pick my favorite example for the time being, when Blockbuster CEO John Antioco declined to purchase Netflix. This was in the year 2000, when Blockbuster was at the top of the video rental market, while Netflix, founded 2 years earlier, like most new companies, was losing money. As an aside, even though the company had yet to turn a profit, I bet the people who packed CDs into envelopes weren't working for free. 10 years later, Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy, while today, Netflix has an estimated 231 million global subscribers. Meanwhile, there is only one Blockbuster left in all of America. Large established brands are a lot less likely to go under than upstarts. But it does happen. It's usually not because the workers weren't working hard enough. I'm sure the folks stocking the shelves at Blockbuster were doing just fine. No, the company failed because the people who ran it failed to keep up with the changing times. When CEOs or companies make bad decisions, it can often devolve into the company becoming an irrelevant punchline. Think MySpace. However, when the leadership of a company makes good decisions, decisions that lead to increased growth and profits, we tend to take it for granted, and the left starts to screech about how they're exploiting their workers. McDonald's is a great example of a success story, and so many of us take for granted that they can just crank out burgers at a profit, like it's the easiest thing in the world. In fact, McDonald's pioneered or perfected so many of the features of fast food franchises that seem so obvious to us. The story of how McDonald's established itself in the United States is fairly well known and pretty well documented, so I'm not going to go over that here. How they became an international juggernaut is an even more impressive story as far as I'm concerned. First off, it's hard to overstate just how big of a company McDonald's is in the world. According to their website, McDonald's has 38,000 locations in over 100 countries. It's probably the most recognized brand in the world, and arguably the most successful American company to ever exist. As John F. Love writes in McDonald's Behind the Arches, McDonald's success abroad is one of the best kept secrets of American business. In the business press, the story has been buried under daily reminders of the growth of the U.S. trade deficit and repeated stories about the bombardment of the American market by cheaper and better manufactured imports. Yet, in the last 15 years, while old-line U.S. manufacturers were losing their grip on world markets, McDonald's was establishing its presence around the globe. While Japanese and German auto producers were devouring the American market, McDonald's was quietly becoming the #1 food service chain in Japan and Germany, not to mention the UK, Canada, and Australia. That McDonald's is an international giant, again, is something that we just take for granted. But it was by no means guaranteed when McDonald's decided to go international in the 1970s. For starters, hamburgers and French fries, despite their names, were mostly American foods. Furthermore, middle-class families eating out on non-special occasions was also fairly unique to America. In Europe at the time, restaurants were mostly relegated to traditional black-tie, multi-course fine dining. McDonald's going overseas wasn't just an experiment in introducing new restaurants. It was the introduction of a new dining culture. So, how did McDonald's go about taking over the world? Well, they exported what came to be known as the McDonald's system. First off, they stuck to their core identity. With the exception of a handful of deviations and countries where it's taboo to eat beef, they largely stuck with their core menu items. They kept the same operating system, and they've maintained a pretty consistent look and atmosphere of their restaurants. Much like Ray Kroc did back when the restaurant was expanding in the States, they found franchisees who were the right fit and bought into their culture. In all other matters, especially advertising, franchisees were given wide latitude. As Love writes, McDonald's succeeded in attracting abroad the same types of independent-minded entrepreneurs Kroc had recruited in the early days of the chain. People willing to take a huge gamble introducing food products and systems that were unknown in their countries. Yet expanding through local partners was only half the secret to franchising abroad. Giving those partners nearly complete freedom to develop local approaches to the market was the other. Other guys who run American subsidiaries in Australia can't believe the autonomy I'm given, says Peter Ritchie, the Australian chairman of McDonald's Worldwide. In giving such free rein to foreign partners, McDonald's was choosing action over bureaucratic review and allowing youthful foreign presidents to learn by making their own mistakes. It seems a reasonable approach for an international approach, yet other fast food chains rarely operate that way. Again, this international strategy was crafted by their corporate leadership, including various CEOs, not the guys flipping burgers. On top of all this, McDonald's international expansion is a great example of the importance of capital. When McDonald's has entered foreign markets, with the exception of the Taiwanese market, it's usually years before the stores start turning a profit. As Love writes, McDonald's has never lacked for patience in its attempt to export its food system. Other fast food competitors have pulled out of foreign markets after being discouraged by the initial losses. But McDonald's has yet to retreat from any market. McDonald's actually has left the Russian market since Putin's invasion of Ukraine, but this book was written before that. In the Netherlands, where the international marketing effort began, it took 12 years for McDonald's to make a profit. And on average, the chain has waited 9 years for each new international venture to make money. It has hung on in some markets even after disastrous setbacks. Even though the company loses money in new markets for almost a decade on average, the folks who made the food still got paid. In other words, the greedy, fat, top-hat-wearing capitalist who extracts surplus labor value from his poor workers doesn't expect the workers to cover his losses. Also, for what it's worth, apparently McDonald's does do profit sharing with its workers. Now, I have nothing against anyone who works at McDonald's, whatever it is they do there. All honest work deserves respect. But the fact of the matter is, your average burger flipper is a lot easier to replace than a single corporate executive. But what about all the frontline workers together? Surely McDonald's without line cooks isn't a McDonald's. By the way, I guess McDonald's doesn't have line cooks, but I cannot say this for sure. I've never worked in the food service industry, so these distinctions are completely unfamiliar to me. But yes, if all the workers just didn't show up for work tomorrow, with the exception of that one fully automated restaurant in Texas, McDonald's wouldn't function. The thing is, you can play this game with all the factors of production. If all the potato crops failed, we wouldn't have French fries for very long, now would we? If McDonald's had all of its assets frozen, how long would they be able to keep the lights on at their restaurants? And if the corporate leadership just went away, their entrepreneurs in this case, McDonald's would probably be fine for a while because of what previous entrepreneurs have built. This one would be the slow death, though. Just as McDonald's rise didn't happen overnight, Its decline wouldn't be instantaneous either. We've seen large, well-established companies fail to innovate and die out before. There's no reason it couldn't happen to McDonald's under bad leadership. While this might seem unthinkable, at one point in time, an American burger restaurant taking over the world seemed unthinkable too.